Good morning, everybody. This is Julie McCowan with Fusion Productions, and we are so happy that you joined us today and that we have the opportunity to present this wonderful encore presentation from Digital Now 2018. So I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping things with you before we begin. We're going to be muting everybody's line because we are going to be recording this session, so you can go back and watch it later on if there's anything that you missed, if you want to share it with anyone. You will be able to unmute yourself at any time if you have a question, but we ask that you just use the raise hand feature that's part of the Zoom platform, and then we will take a break and address questions as we can. So at this time, I would like to pass the microphone off to our host, Don D., co-founder of Fusion Productions.
Good morning as well. I hope that everyone is hopefully have all the clouds and the flooding behind them wherever you are in this part of your part of the country. I think, as Julie mentioned, the title of our session is something that is very appropriate. It's not that often that you can put together a program that really fully takes advantage of the assets that we as our association organizations have built in terms of our certifications and our credentialing, and more importantly, the education that our members have or customers have participated with us. And this particular opportunity is really something that is a proven experience and with CompTIA, and also more importantly, I think the nature of how this is delivered, I think, really sends an important message in terms of both a strategy as well as a capability. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our two presenters here. And in one of my other non-day jobs, I serve as treasurer on the board of trustees of a school, of a college that serves primarily adult learners and those of mission. And so I get a chance to be around almost 1,500 adjunct faculty and experts in adult learning and in the higher education space. And I can tell you, though, that the two people that we have here today really represent probably the top 1% in terms of their profession, both and more importantly, from the perspective of execution experience, from the perspective of passion for adult learning, and from the perspective of leadership in their respective fields. The first person is Tom Riley. Tom is someone who I've had a chance to know both as a faculty at Digital Now as well as a participant for many years. Tom has been a successful entrepreneur in this whole area of adult learning. He's been a successful executive. He's had a passion, again, as I said, for lifelong learning and how to do that in a way that is really respectful of his members and customers in terms of delivery and value on that side. So Tom currently serves as the Vice President of Learning for CompTIA, and he was brought in to really take a fledgling program, and I can't think of a better experience and a better person to really articulate how do you sit there and service an organization whose sole purpose is really about technology and understanding how do they stay current, and then more importantly, stay current because it is their source of livelihood. So that ability to really observe and learn and get certified is critical. So Tom will bring his perspective on this, and then our other really key person here is Anish Rongnaker, and Anish is also in that same category, as I said, in that 1% of a successful entrepreneur who really understood a set of real critical issues around adult learning and really put his mind to putting together the capabilities of BenchPrep to really solve some hard problems. And I think today you're going to get a chance to see what all of this is all about. So I'd like now to turn it over to Tom and Ashish.
Thanks a lot, Don, for the warm and thoughtful introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Ashish, and I have Tom with me here.
Good morning.
Now, before we jump in, just one more thing. Okay. We are very excited to share this presentation and kind of some learnings that we have learned over the last kind of few years doing this. We would love to get some feedback and questions from you. So as Julie called out, if you have any questions, just use that feature and we'll kind of get to that towards the end of the presentation. Now, we want to talk about the topic of the conversation is reboot your recertification process. And we have the best person with us to be able to talk about this. So I quickly want to reintroduce my accomplished co-presenter, Tom Riley. As Don mentioned, he's the VP of Learning at CompTIA. He launched CompTIA Learning within a 30-year-old nonprofit. And he single-handedly architected the Cert Master program, which is a series of digital learning programs which completely changed the way CompTIA delivered learning to their stakeholders. And we'll learn a lot about kind of how that transition happened and the learnings from that.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Tom Riley. Thank you, Ashish, for that nice introduction. I'd like to also give you a little more detail on Ashish. He's probably one of the most humble people I know, but one of the most accomplished. Ashish is CEO and co-founder of BenchPrep, a Chicago-based learning science company. A little bit about BenchPrep. They enable education and training companies to launch digital training programs and training strategies. They partner with many large training companies and publishers, including CompTIA, and as a result of that work have served more than 3 million learners. Something I also usually like to say about Ashish is I met him and his partner Ujjwal when they were fresh out of MBA school, and it's been really exciting to see the growth and success of their company. They've been touted many times recently as one of the most successful technology companies launching out of Chicago.
Thanks, Tom. All righty, so let's talk a little bit about goals of this session. And when Tom and myself started to kind of put this together, we wanted to kind of make sure that there are a couple of really tangible outcomes coming out of this. So the first is we want to discuss how do we design a truly frictionless recertification program with the goal of driving high margin new revenue for your organization. That's where we would kind of focus on first. Right? But when you take a step back, the second goal would be to really kind of think about improving long-term engagement and knowledge retention. So how do we actually design these programs with these two goals in mind? And last but not the least, how do we leverage technology to reduce administrative costs? At times, new programs, new initiatives kind of can be daunting, but there are ways to leverage kind of these technology tools to simplify some of these business practices, simplify processes, and to kind of accelerate that innovation cycle. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that third goal as well. First, let's take a step back and look at a couple of macro trends that we are seeing in this market, which are accelerating a need for this digital transformation. First is the fact that lifelong learning is here to stay. Lifelong learning or continuous learning is not just a buzzword anymore. It's an economic imperative for today's professionals. In fact, we see that ROI on getting a non-degree professional certification is very solid. You get a non-degree professional certification and your average annual salary increases by roughly $25,000. That's a significant improvement. Also, we are seeing that millennials are switching jobs every 2 to 3 years. That requires a need for retraining them every kind of 2, 3 years. Technology is changing very fast. That is accelerating a need for kind of continuous learning and retraining. So all in all, there are kind of few things coming together that's making us kind of realize that lifelong learning is here to stay and has very powerful ROI attached to it. Now, when we think of the modern learner, right, today's learner, they're very different than what they used to be 15 years ago. One, they're untethered. They're on the move. They're working remotely. They don't have a desire to walk into a classroom on a Wednesday morning 9 a.m. They want everything to be delivered on their mobile device, anytime, anywhere access. They are distracted. They get too many Slack messages, too many emails. Their attention span is low. Most of them won't watch videos that are longer than 4 minutes. They're just a very different learner, and education and training companies and associations have to figure out ways to engage this learner. Another trend is this kind of, specifically speaking about technology education, there is this balance between kind of always on micro experiences and macro experiences. So if you think of the life cycle of a technology professional, it starts with getting a license or a initial certification. That's an entry point into the ecosystem. In the first 6 months or the first 9 months on the job, they have to learn a lot that is specific to that particular job or that particular organization. That's kind of the job training, on the job training aspect of it. Then begins the cycle of continuing education. I mean, by this time, technology has changed, so they have to kind of stay on top of it. And then as they become to kind of get quote unquote seasoned, another kind of wave begins. So either they can just kind of continue on that continuing education cycle within the same job, or almost kind of get another certification for a step change into a promotion or a new role. And you can see like some of these are kind of micro learning experiences, some of them are macro, but they're always on. And education and training companies and associations have to be aware of how these macro and learning experiences are impacting the learner and design products that fit this life cycle.
And Ashish, I was going to make one comment on that. To your point, I think people tend to think in terms of the macro learning. But the micro learning now with the speed of change is equally and sometimes more important. And you can imagine the scenario if you're head of IT for a company and the CEO walks in and says, why aren't we doing anything with blockchain? What is your answer to that? There's not a certification for blockchain, but it's an important key concept that could have major impact on the industry. And continuous ed in a lifelong learning context, those experiences will give the opportunity to answer that question in an intelligent way. So I think that's a great example of the micro learning being as important, sometimes if not more important, than those larger macro learning experiences.
Absolutely, Tom. And I think that's why, the blockchain example is a perfect example. And as we kind of think about the lifelong learning, and also the role that recertification and continuing education plays in all of this. I mean, first and foremost, recertification is a proven way to show commitment to lifelong learning. Right? That candidate who is curious and who is really kind of is proactive about taking on courses related to blockchain and other technologies is that much more committed towards lifelong learning. Second is also kind of a really good way and really kind of universally accepted way to indicate expertise. And specifically in technology, and this is actually true for a lot of other verticals as well, proving mastery is becoming more and more important. Right? And going through the recertification process and getting recertified and kind of continuing the education is a very good way of indicating that expertise. The third thing is also, today we live in a world where I almost think that there is a lot of content out there, which creates this chaos around lifelong learning. I mean, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Wikipedia, there are tons and tons of free, non-free, paid content out there. And the role that we see recertification plays is it almost kind of organizes this chaos into very well-defined modules that you can kind of work towards with very well specified and defined goals, which kind of organizes the way you want to approach lifelong learning.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, from this cartoon here, I think the experience Ashish and I have had, the world of recertification is about to change. You know, one of the things we live in today is very much becoming what I would call subscription economy. And I think associations have to look at their ability to deliver continuous experiences, continuous education to their member base, because we're living in the world of Netflix, and we're living in the world of people wanting the ability to subscribe to a program, get continuous education, continuous entertainment, and where people have those experiences in their consumer experience, they then bring that expectation to business, and they expect to have those same ability to log on, get what they need when they need it. And as we'll talk about later in the presentation, in the original continuing education program we were providing our members, we weren't providing that new experience. And so I think that's an important piece here. So one of the things we were faced with when we looked at our alumni after they got a CompTIA certification, we realized we were in many cases having a very transactional, one and done experience with our customers. For those who are not familiar with CompTIA, our A+ certification is really seen as the on-ramp for an IT career. Someone who gets an A+ certification without a college degree can come out and land a $40,000 to $50,000 a year beginning IT job. But what we would see from our data is that a lot of people would get that first job, then they really didn't know what the next step was. They weren't ready to take another certification yet. And in some cases, they would let that certification lapse. And we did offer a continuing education program, we still do, which is a good program. But as we talked about, that traditional program, which is used a lot by our DoD customers, was not as attractive to some of our younger demographic who were looking for that more instant on, frictionless way to renew their certifications. So we found that our program created friction, and particularly to our younger demographic, it seemed cumbersome. And we'll kind of show the steps that they originally had to go through and what the new program provides. For CompTIA, just to give a little background on why renewal or recertification is important to us, we have more than 2.4 million CompTIA certified alumni out in the world working in IT. And majority of our exams are high stakes exams. And high stakes, for those not aware, mean that organizations, government agencies can make hiring and firing decisions based on people maintaining those certifications. And those certifications have to be renewed every 3 years. So for that person who gets that A+ certification, it's good for 3 years. And then, because technology is changing at an accelerated rate, they either need to retake the test or use our continuing education program to renew. One of the things that's important too, when we look at not just why it's important to CompTIA, but to employers, we realize that recertification is a way to keep certified professional skills up to date. In some certifications out in the world that are still good for life, if someone got that technology certification 20 years ago, they may be an expert on 14.4 modems, but that's probably not going to be useful out in the market today. So that's why it's very important to employers that they know that their people are up to date and up to speed. It's particularly important to CompTIA. A lot of our focus in our certifications is security. And I think after some of the major exploits out in the world, organizations are probably all asking themselves, are the people on the front lines securing my company, are they up to speed? Are they up with the latest trends and technologies and ways to thwart attacks of the company? So it's really important to employers. For CompTIA, the value of recertification is it keeps those certified professionals engaged with us, and they're much likely to go on and take more advanced exams. And CompTIA is a nonprofit. The more people that get certified or renew their certification are more people who are getting those good IT jobs and who are advancing in their careers. A couple of things to know, as I mentioned earlier, that were some of our barriers. We were not allowing us to achieve our maximum success. Many of them had to do with a program that had kind of grown and evolved over time. And in those type of evolutionary programs, sometimes can become very difficult to change them. So what we realized we needed to do is we really needed to, other than really try to tweak the program, we need to provide a new way for people to renew their certification. CompTIA's traditional CE program, we saw that it was just really too difficult when we mapped it out. Again, for some organizations, they have some tools that help them manage this program, but for a typical consumer, there were, as you can see, there were many, many steps involved with someone getting their certification, getting that renewal. And this process here that we show on the screen was for someone to record CEUs really for one event. And when someone would have to get, potential of 40 hours of CEUs, it would be do this process and potentially repeat 20 times. And that was definitely a high friction situation.
I think that's where I would actually give a lot of credit to Tom and CompTIA, that when they saw this kind of multi-step process and began to kind of figure out how do we improve that and how do we engage today's learner, rather than thinking about it in kind of just minor incremental ways, they took a step back and said, let's look at the right framework for these certification programs. Let's design something that will truly facilitate this continuous lifelong learning through the entire life cycle. And there were two key tenets to that new framework. First, let's give the power back to the user. Let the candidate, the professional, who is the key stakeholder here, let them choose their pathway. Let them choose the device that they want to access it on. Let them choose the time of the day and the approach or the modality that's going to be most relevant to them. So let's give them the democratic access to be able to drive their own learning. And on the other hand, let's look internally. Like, how do we actually accelerate this transformation by making it easier for our team members, for our staff, by automating a lot of these workflows? And I cannot stress more on the second aspect of things, because a lot of times the learning experience that's kind of provided to the external stakeholder drives the conversation, but the true execution and the implementation, which is driven by internal kind of staff members, takes the backseat. And it's the latter version, the workflows and the communication tools that you put in internally, that's going to kind of drive the long-term success of these kind of frameworks.
Yeah, absolutely, Ashish. So I think when we looked at those two key things, we started to revamp that certification program, the renewal process, to align with the candidate and what their journey is. So a couple of the key tenets. First off, we said, one thing I learned very early on in my days at Arthur Andersen is don't automate a process that's too complicated. First, simplify the process, then bring in the technology. So I think that was a key learning. Secondly, we realized we had to provide the ability to buy the course and get started immediately. This is the world of Netflix. This is the world of when I need it, I want to turn it on, and when I'm done, I turn it off. We knew that that these courses also would only apply to certain people. We didn't want someone who was not a CompTIA certified person to kind of come in off the street, go to our store, buy something that was a renewal product and was not a certification preparation product. So I did not want the director of customer support knocking on my door saying, just had 100 people buy a course, it doesn't apply to them. So we included certification verification automation so that we could reduce incorrect purchases, which has been very successful. We also automated the renewal by having a pass sent directly to the certification database. Kind of goes back to what Ashish and I talked about early on about reducing the friction. So now, instead of spending another 10 minutes logging in, going in, uploading something, we know who you are. We know that you passed your renewal course, and we can send that directly to the certification database, and you're automatically recertified. And by adding this new process, we now had multiple options for people to recertify. So for those people who like the traditional program, they could stay with it. But for people who wanted that newer, streamlined approach to recertification, they had that new option. So what that ended up for us, working closely with BenchPrep, was that we were able to deliver this new experience to a modern candidate. So the product is digital and digital, web, and mobile. So it's, as we said, anytime, anywhere. It's self-paced and self-directed. The person can log on when and where they want to and work on their renewal. And their knowledge is updated and verified in real time as they work through the course.
I think I'll just add, like, there are a couple of design principles that we used while we were designing this experience for CompTIA. First was around structure. So how do we actually enable the candidate and help them figure out what to do next? What's that one action that they need to do so that they're not overwhelmed with this process of kind of getting to their end goal? They can just focus on that one and only action that they need to take at any given point. So structure was one of the key design principles. Second was engagement. So how do we actually kind of design incentives so that the candidate keeps coming back, and we reduce drop-offs during this process. And the third was analytics. How do we actually tell the candidate where do they stand today? Are they making progress? And what do they need to do to get to that end goal? And you'll see how this self-paced, self-directed kind of experience that is completely digital, omni-channel, in fact, with these three design principles, kind of really drove a lot of engagement for CompTIA. I'm gonna give you guys a quick demo of what that CompTIA recertification program or a course looks like. I'll have to step out. So this is a program that we created for the Security Plus certification. It's called CertMaster CE for Security Plus. And Tom, keep me honest here, but this is the candidate who's coming in already has the Security Plus certification, and they come in to renew their certification by completing this course.
That's correct, Ashish.
And imagine if we put ourselves in the shoes of the candidate, you know, they know that they need to kind of get certified for this. They want a simplified way to get to that end goal. And now CompTIA has provided this one course with a very step-by-step process to get to that end goal. So in here, a candidate comes in, they can actually set their own date and say, I think I need to get my kind of renewal done by September 12th. That's my deadline. I have 48 days left. And now they can see very well arranged every single objective and the associated study tasks with it. Every single study task is bite-sized in nature, so they know exactly how much time it's going to take them to finish it. You know, just a reminder, these are working professionals, they have jobs, they have families, they need to squeeze this in within their busy lives. Every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes that they can get to get this done is extremely valuable. So just kind of working backwards from how they operate and making sure that the course design fits to their lifestyle or their working style was a key design principle. You can see that their renewal status is not started here. They have to finish these 13 tasks to be able to get to that renewal status. So one course, very simple linear structure. They know exactly what to do next. This is their next study task. One task at a time, they'll get to the finish line. I'm just switching over to a different demo account. In this case, same user has actually finished 12 out of those 13 assessments. So all they need to do now is finish one more assessment and they'll get their certification or recertification status. So I'm going to actually do this. So I finished the assessment. I scored 100%. I can again go and review this assessment. I finished my today's knowledge goal, and when I go back to my learning plan, it'll indicate that all the assessments were done, my renewal status is achieved, and I'm good to go. Simple design, incentives that are related to knowledge goals and today's tasks, and of course, kind of a very the focus on finishing and reaching their goals. Another aspect of the design here was kind of strengths and weaknesses. So the goal was to kind of highlight where exactly you should be focusing on. So every candidate gets this qualitative measure of their strengths and weaknesses along key modules or concepts. So they can see that from in technology and tools, I'm an expert, but when it comes to architecture and design, I'm only at the proficient level. And these kind of analytics kind of de-averages the score and makes it more actionable, because now I know exactly what to focus on to be able to get recertified. As we launched this with CompTIA, we realized that we need to kind of, really push the envelope and start figuring out ways to further engage the learner within environments that are very close to their actual work. So CompTIA started to design these performance-based questions that are essentially, as the name suggests, very close to what they need to know to be able to perform their job well. And here is an example of a performance-based question where there is a scenario which is very kind of tied neatly to the learning objectives for this particular certification, and the engagement is very much driven by kind of more interactive elements. So here is a performance-based question where the goal is setting aside the issue of firewall placement and positioning certain elements in their appropriate locations. So and the way CompTIA wanted to design this was kind of allowing candidates to kind of do few tries, and with every try, they kind of get closer to the right answer. So here are just certain elements that we used as we were kind of completely redesigning the experience and moving away from kind of 17 steps to this very simple modular design.
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. That's a great demonstration. When I look at that now, reminds me when we started the project. Again, as this slide shows, our traditional program, it was a traditional CE program. Someone would attend a webinar, a conference, take an e-learning course. They would print out a receipt. They would make a PDF. They'd then log into their certification account. 5 clicks later, they're uploading those CEUs. Those CEUs would often have to be reviewed and granted, and then they would repeat this process until they achieved all the CEUs for that course. And that was a program for some organizations that is still the way they choose to do business, and it works very well for them. But we found there was an opportunity to engage other people who were saying, I would maintain that certification if we could modernize the experience and make it more friction-free. And we've had great success with that. So the new CE program you see at the bottom of the diagram, they log on to the website, buy the course, complete it, and their renewal is automatically sent to the database, which has really been a game changer. And has allowed many more people who may have let their renewal lapse are now renewing in much, much higher numbers. So bottom line, the program for us has been a resounding success. We've a 20% increase in new revenue, 15,000 renewals in 2018. And again, many of these, a large majority of these renewals are people not who would have renewed with the old program. Many of those people are still using the traditional program because it works for them. These are people who would not, who were not renewing, who are now renewing their certification. And there'll be over 15,000 of those in the first full year. To credit to Ashish and the team on the design of the program, consistently we're at 4.75 out of 5 stars. We've also had some indirect savings. We've been able to redeploy some of our resources that we're spending time administering the traditional program and redeploy them into higher value tasks. We are also finding that users are now much more likely to buy CompTIA more products and services because we've kept them engaged and kept them in our ecosystem. And again, for CompTIA as a nonprofit, the certification business is one of the economic drivers of our nonprofit, and it allows us to go out and do a lot of good in the world through our foundation. So it's definitely been a much stickier solution, and it really keeps people coming back and keeps them engaged as CompTIA members.
And just a reminder, I mean, this is year one, just the first year. So as this kind of program grows, I think we'll get to know the second order impact of this change. But it was phenomenal to see the clear ROI and the engagement that this kind of a program can drive within the first 12 months of launch.
Yeah, absolutely. And as more and more of our certifications at renewal at 3 years move into the cycle, we see those numbers only growing. But with the close to 15,000 we've done, we have learned a lot working closely with BenchPrep. One of the key things I mentioned before, some of the key takeaways, you really need to come up with an alternate or way, a new program, or simplify your current program before you automate them. Otherwise, you're automating complexity, which is not a best practice, and will sometimes create an outcome for your users, which is not what you wanted it to be and not as easy. The other thing we took away was the importance of creating a cross-functional team, a project plan, and a roadmap, and really stuck to the idea is, what is our minimum viable product? Start with a version 1, freeze that, and then move on with additional ideas. As I learned in my days in startup software companies, it's important for the rocket to be light and thin to get up and out past the clouds. And then as you gain experience and knowledge, you can expand the program. The other thing, obviously, is pick the right learning provider. You really have to have a flexible learning management system that can handle the nuances of a CE program and integration. And you've got to have a talented development team on both sides that can work toward good solutions. We were integrating our certification database with the BenchPrep learning platform. So we had to really have a great cross-functional team on both sides to enable that. And I speak from that from experience, having been a reformed learning management system developer myself from many years ago. I think the last thing we realized is if you understand your customer and provide an efficient, fun way to renew their certification, more people are going to renew. As we say, turns out people prefer not to take really hard tests if there's an alternative.
So what do we do now? I think that's the key question. It has been a great success for CompTIA, but how do we actually take this, create a blueprint, go into our organizations and drive this change? And there are multiple steps kind of based on where you are in this kind of transformation, digital transformation life cycle, or what certification or recertification program and processes do you have already. But Tom and I kind of sat down and said, okay, I think there are these 5, 6 things that everyone should be looking at, or the key questions they should be asking as they begin to evaluate this. And the first and foremost was kind of just looking internally and just getting to the root cause of why are people or your candidates and your stakeholders renewing or not renewing. Survey is a good way of doing it. There are multiple ways of kind of getting to that answer here, but just kind of reviewing your current renewal statistics, identifying the key KPI or a metric that you need to fix should always be the starting point. Second,
I was going to say, kind of adding on to that, really is number 2. you have to really, as you dig in and get those survey results and possibly also do focus groups, which we found to be very valuable, you have to find out if it's complexity or inconvenience in impacting the satisfaction and renewal rates. Again, as Ashish mentioned many times, with the pace that people work at, the always on, the demands of work, if you find that it's the complexity or inconvenience of your program, but that people value your certification, that provides you then have an opportunity, and you have an opportunity to improve, which I think is what we found out.
Another dimension is just kind of looking internally and doing an audit of how these continuing education programs are administered today. How many people are involved, how many touch points the candidate has to go through, how is the internal staff spending time on what activities, can they be simplified, can they be automated, and as we move to this kind of digital platform, how much of that can be mitigated. So I think an internal audit is an important step in this journey.
Yeah, and I think as you do that, you'll also figure out, as you do that audit, the pain may be with your customers, but it also may be with your internal staff, and there's an opportunity to leverage them more and give them more rewarding job experience. Along with that, it's really important to segment your renewals. Who are the groups of people? For CompTIA, we serve an extremely diverse base of people. We have people selling and servicing our products in multiple countries around the world. We service corporations, governments, local workforce development groups. And from that, we were able to start to segment and see some patterns among those groups. And so I think looking at the data again, very, very important. It allows you to kind of build that first hypothesis and then test it. And that was really important to us.
And as a result of all this, I mean, essentially, there is a revenue opportunity within a specific segment or as the entire kind of population as a whole. And we have seen with CompTIA and with a variety of other kind of partners that if you provide a engaging, personalized, gamified, bite-sized learning experience to these candidates, they would happily engage. And this engagement drives not just the short-term revenue from a recertification perspective, but long-term revenue opportunities as they engage more and more with your association. And that's the bottom line of doing all of this. So that was the story, a phenomenal transformation that CompTIA saw with resounding success in the last 12 months. And the journey is only beginning. Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll try to kind of get some questions and we'll answer those. So we have a question that says, for certifications like HRCI, which is Human Resource Certification Institute, they have certifications called APHR, PHR, and SPHR, where recertification credits are earned outside of the certifying body, and there is not a specific program or course that needs to be achieved. How do you recommend that an independent recertification provider achieve this frictionless model of validating the learner certification with HRCI and automate their recertification credit in their HRCI profile? Yeah. Great question. So first of all, I'll kind of call out that, and Tom kind of mentioned this as well, step one, our goal here was not to kind of completely replace all other options that CompTIA was providing or HRCI might be providing to the candidates. The goal was to kind of offer a frictionless alternate. And this is where that segmentation kind of comes in. There would always be a segment who want to kind of go to a seminar or a conference and kind of earn their CEUs that way. Right? But there is this new emerging and growing segment that actually wants things, on their mobile device for a variety of reasons. They might not have time to kind of, go to a conference. So this kind of a solution does very well to engage that segment or that population. So in this kind of example, that if you're an independent recertification provider, this can very well be done. I think the steps that need to be kind of, taken are, how do you actually push or how do you integrate your solution with the recertification credit providers, in this case, HRCI, and those integrations can very well be done. So as I think about this, there are three things to consider. First is kind of defining that segment that you are kind of going after. It might not be everyone, but it can be very well kind of defined segment. Second, for that segment, what specific modules of recertification really matter? Right? In the example of CompTIA, when there's not going to be just one recertification course, there is a variety of courses, and the candidate can come in and pick and choose based on where they are in their recertification journey. So for that segment, designing the courses that are very relevant to them. And the third piece is working with HRCI and figuring out what those integration points look like. And from a perspective of HRCI, they would want to kind of automate some of these processes as well, because they don't want to get faxes and PDFs and kind of, validate them and manually enter in their certification database. So it's a win-win kind of proposition, and we are seeing with a variety of associations that slowly they are kind of moving into this place where these are automated certification databases that learning platforms can integrate into.
Ashish, I think that's you covered that very well. The piece that I would add to that is, as you said, it starts with the audience, and it starts also, if it's a recertification, it starts with the objectives. And I think the approach that we took was starting with the exam objectives. How did the exam change from one release to the other? And then could we create a bridge course that would provide them knowledge and learning of what changed since the last time the exam renewed? So as an independent consultant, that's another area that I would look at, is really study the objectives of the certification. And there could be an opportunity to go in with a point of view on how you could provide a course that would bridge someone from the previous certification to the next one. And that would start with really having a strong understanding of how the exam changed from one version to the next. Bringing that in, being able to present a point of view on how you could automate that process and provide a new alternative way would be very successful.
Perfect. We have 5 minutes left, so if you guys have any more questions, we can kind of jump into that. Meanwhile, I'll just kind of make one comment. I want to go back to Tom's example earlier in the conversation about blockchain. And we see the world moving more and more to a point where these new concepts and kind of these micro modules are going to play a very important role in the recertification or the continuing education process. And as you guys think about reinventing your recertification program, figuring out a framework that would allow you to come up with those modules, launch those kind of micro courses or modules, and then distribute it through a platform, the digital learning platform, is going to be a important aspect. Let it be HR, finance, accounting, healthcare, technology. This is a rather universal trend, which is here to stay. So as you kind of think about this, just make sure that things are done in a way that are very agile and flexible and modular, and that gives you a lot of flexibility in the version 2, version 3, and kind of a 3 to 5 year initiative. Awesome. Thanks a lot. I think these are kind of fun conversations to have. The way we kind of look at the world, I think we are still kind of in the early stages of this transition. And the best part of about all this is our candidates and our customers are driving this transition. They are demanding us to move in this direction. All of us are kind of, run mission-driven organization, and our mission is to serve our stakeholders. And this is a great place to be, where our stakeholders are showing us the right direction of moving towards this flexible digital recertification program that's delivered in an omni-channel kind of way. And we'll get on to that. So.
Great. And thanks, Ashish. Appreciate you helping share the story today. I want to thank Don and Julie also for helping us work on this today and present this out to the team. And if you have never been to Don's Digital Now conference, you've got to go. It's probably one of the best conferences I've ever been to. It really, I kind of call it TED for associations. It is a true, bring together of technology, education, design, and it is a phenomenal conference. So thank you very much, Don and Julie.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ashish. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.